Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. This is episode 6 of season 2, and I'm your host, Tim Vogel. In today's episode, we're speaking with Keith LaRose of CopperTree Analytics. Hey Keith, welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
Hey Tim, great to be here. Thank you. I don't know if you're going to live up. I'm going to live up to that genius mark here, but I'll give it a shot. I appreciate the.
That's
the
all right.
honor.
Well, I wouldn't have invited you if I didn't think you were a genius.
No thanks.
Yeah.
That's great.
I try to bring other smarter people onto the show so that hopefully my intellect will, raise to their level. That's the whole idea.
Right.
That's the subversive, reason for this whole project.
I'll take it.
But Keith, you and I have had an opportunity to work together and partner professionally as we talk about cloud-based technologies and analytics and how we push the industry forward. And every time we've either done a webinar or a presentation or we've co-sold together, you've always had just a very authentic and genuine approach to what you're doing. And I also get the sense that you really want to genuinely help people with either the solution or the technology or the conversation or with their approach. So honestly, that is why, I wanted to have you on this, because it takes a certain kind of personality and approach and demeanor to have that kind of, approach to just the industry you're selling or whatever it is. And I think the product in particular that you help sell and develop and influence is one that also I think is going to be a huge help to our industry moving forward as people are looking at, how do I stretch my team to be able to do more effectively in the labor issues that we find ourselves in. So Keith, let's first start. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about CopperTree Analytics and what you find yourself, doing most of the hours of the day.
Yeah, for sure. So, Keith LaRose, and I grew up in Montreal, Canada. So I'm Canadian, and I still live in Canada, and I'm now out in Vancouver, so the West Coast, and quite enjoy the lifestyle that brings along with it, as far as outdoorsy opportunities. Getting out, the great outdoors is one of my passions, and I've been working here at CopperTree. It's almost 10 years now, Tim. And in the very early stages of that journey, I'm sure we can get into kind of how I ended up here, but in the beginning, it was certainly a new technology. I mean, picture, 10 years ago where things were, you were in the industry still at that point too, and, where things were with technology and the adoption and, the future of, is kind of where we are now. So it's a really interesting time to join and come into this industry and start working in it. As far as what I do day to day, I mean, I run the sales and marketing team for CopperTree. So, what that involves obviously is working with the team and the reps and handling, marketing strategies and working on our, web strategies and SEO and AdWords and then, sales pursuits. But probably the biggest part of my day or my job is strategic partnership. So I work a lot with our large customers and strategic partners such as yourselves at KMC in, sort of evolving our business relationships and taking on new markets and expanding to new, areas. So that's what keeps me jazzed and going every day is kind of the pursuit and the growth and kind of bringing new customers and partners on board and helping both companies align ourselves.
Yeah. And I know, recently your company's grown, your team has grown a little bit. And so with that then comes more opportunities to influence a team and build a team and continue with that strategy, which is, fun and rewarding and exciting and all the things that, those of us that love business and love sales, we get to do. So you said you've been at CopperTree for 10 years. Were you in the industry before you came to CopperTree?
No, I was in an industry, just not this one. Yeah. I've always been in high tech, I guess, in technology fields, but no, I was in a completely different industry before I moved into, I guess, what you could broadly call the, sort of building automation, smart building, IoT technology field. That wasn't my area of expertise previously.
So let's go back to schooling. You
Yeah.
went to college, I presume,
Yep.
and got a
Yep.
degree and all that. So what was all that in?
The first thing I did was it was actually through night school. So I took network engineering through a college here in Vancouver, with the thoughts. And previous to that, I'd sort of started being quite interested in technology. At the time, it was building your own computers, and we were kind of in the early days of home computing. Maybe not the early days, but certainly not where we are today, where hobbyists would still put together computers. So I really enjoyed that aspect of technology, and I started self-teaching myself a little bit of uh, techniques and things to do with computer systems and how to surf the internet. And I was one of the first people I know who had home internet, let's say, and I used to use that quite a bit. And yeah, I guess when the opportunity came along, once I had sort of stabilized a little bit after high school, I decided, I want to pursue a career in technology, and I thought maybe I'll be a programmer or a network admin. At that time, network admins and those kind of engineers were pretty hot commodities and just kind of a new and upcoming career. So I joined that schooling and completed that. But in the meantime, kind of through that journey of going to school, I needed to support myself during the day. So I was going to night school and I was working during the day. And I got a job at our local, kind of large telephone and internet service provider here called TELUS, which is kind of part owned by Verizon, in sales. Because of my personality has always been sort of outgoing. And even as a kid, I used to apparently negotiate at the toy store and try to, try to get better deals on things at the toy store. And I was always a salesman.
Yes.
So with that personality of mine, I decided, I'll give this a shot. And I ended up in a position. It was actually telemarketing, pretty much. I mean, I had inbound calls coming in from customers who were like upset about things, and then I had sort of an outbound role where the dialing machine would sort of just. I'm that guy that you hate, right? That calls you in the middle of dinner time from Verizon or whatever. But it would basically just. This is in the early 2000s, I guess. It would just basically, your computer screen would flash a little name and an account up, and you'd have about 3 seconds as you're introducing yourself. Hey, it's Keith, I'm calling from TELUS. And you scan what they have in their account, and you'd be able to then say, hey, I'm calling because I noticed you don't have, DSL wasn't the new thing at that time. I noticed you don't have ADSL. Do you know you could have much higher speed internet, blah, blah. And then they would say yes or no, and you'd continue down. So there's a lot of training and coaching involved in that job, which were related to kind of like really quickly making rapport, like a lot of the fundamentals that are really important in sales. Anyhow, there was a 5-week full-time training program throughout that position in the very beginning, and then I ended up being kind of one of the top reps, or the top rep anyway on my team for sure. And then in almost the whole call center, and there's a few hundred reps there, mostly just through grit and just not giving up, right, and being enthusiastic and starting the call with a smile and all the things they teach you, right. So I actually really enjoyed sort of the learning aspect of that. And I was young and impressionable at that time. Yeah, so that was kind of how I got into sales. And then I'm also at the same time going through this technical education at the same time with, the idea that, I'll drop sales and I'll move into high tech, in sort of like sysadmin or some kind of network administration position when that was over. And then lo and behold, I started making pretty decent, money in sales, quite enjoyed it. And when the time came around that school was over, I sort of had a fork in the path there to take. And one of them was follow through and go into kind of more engineering side of things, or do I move into sales potentially and continue that? And I was making good enough money there that I thought I would actually be taking a pay cut to go into what I studied, which was interesting.
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, is there a way for me to sort of potentially merge these two things into one, which is ended up being what happened. And I continued my career in sales, and then particularly in technical sales, because then I carved out a niche for myself where, hey, I'm very technical, but I could also do quite a bit of the sales stuff. So ever since then, that's kind of been, the little area I've carved out for myself in any industry I go into, pretty much.
That's interesting. Two things there. One is that idea of taking a job as a customer service rep, and that being an unbeknownst training ground. How do I deal with objections? How do I deal with happy customers, unhappy customers? And then kind of having that reset between each one to say, start that call with a smile.
Yeah.
I look back at my time, and my first retail job was at Lowe's, and it was seasonal outside lawn and garden. And I could still remember this woman coming up to me and asking, "Where are the perennials?" And I'm like,
What?
I have no idea.
Oh, that's funny.
They had trained me and they had told me what an annual was versus a perennial, but I had not taken the time to, better understand that. And so, like, after that, the big eye roll, it was like, oh, I should probably get to know this a little bit more. And so I started learning where everything was. And then from there, the next time someone asks you that question, it's like, hey, I know exactly that answer. And that feels good, right? But that is a real world sort of training exercise. And then when they finally let me go after the seasonal work was over, I had to go find something else. And I was talking to my sister, and I know that she had done quite a bit in food service. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go work at Applebee's because, I like Applebee's. And I got a job there, and I worked there for like 2.5 years. But that's the exact same thing, right? You just think, I'm going there, it's a job, I'm getting it done. But the whole time, they're teaching you how to create that outstanding restaurant experience and how to sell things. And if someone's upset, well, how do you handle that? And again, unbeknownst to me, being trained up in this idea of sales. And then continue to make parallels. I was the marketing guy. I enjoyed technology in the sense of how could I use it to better formulate messaging. And I have found also similar forks in the road where, I could pursue this particular path or this particular path. But what if I meld those together? Then what else can I do? And that idea of, technical, but then also having a personality and being able to sell, that is where I think people can really get a leg up in their career when they're saying, I can walk both of these paths. I could have both of these conversations. And companies are looking for people that can do both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
And so naturally you're like, well, hey, I can go and I can do that. And that's exciting. So, and all of this happened before CopperTree.
Oh,
right?
yeah. That's far before CopperTree. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you found this way of being able to do a little bit of engineering, a little bit of sales, make better money and all that, which is great. What came next after that?
So after that, I started, actually the position at TELUS was a temporary part-time sort of gig, right? So long story, but they ended up moving a lot of the operations to a different province in Canada. And so that position evaporated. And so at that point, I was sort of actively looking for positions. And the next place I landed was in sales for a computer training company. So essentially they were a corporate trainer who went and solicited business from organizations, governmental, non-governmental, corporations, whatever, to train their staff how to utilize computer systems better in their jobs, basically. So they're Excel level 1, Excel level 2, whatever, all the different Office products, all the way up to some pretty intense sort of database, administration type trainings and things like that. And that job was, account management, business development. So basically, at that time, it was like, here's a phone book. It was all local companies. So here's a phone book. I want you to, call these companies. And this is before, Zoom Info and all the other stuff and LinkedIn Sales Navigator and all the tricks and tips that we use nowadays. So it was basically, we had the web. I'd do some web research, find companies that might be good targets for us and give them a call and have to talk to either people in HR. And this is where it was interesting to kind of be a little bit of a chameleon because I'd have to talk to HR sometimes. Other times I'm talking to some database admin. Or another time I'm talking to the IT director or something. So, having those conversations and so still using some technology, obviously, and keeping up on, and then I took a lot of the courses myself, which was great. So I was able to take, when I look at Excel today and most of the things I know from there started from kind of getting really deep dives into learning those tools. So that was my next stop along the way. Yeah. And
Keith, it's funny you say that because, every once in a while you run into someone that's like really good at Excel and you kind of like, oh man, I wish I could be that. You, sir, are one of those people. You sent me a spreadsheet one time. I was like, this thing is incredible. And I was like, I want to do something like that. And so I kind of, in a way, emulated that, for some of our stuff also. And it was like, it's all kind of coming back together now. It's like, oh, I see. If you worked for a company that's, trains people to use technology like Excel efficiently, well, man, you walk the walk on that one. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And the other thing too, I think, quality or something I guess I have is like if I see something and I don't know how to do it, it really angers me a little bit. I try to learn it. So I'll take a
Yeah.
lot of time because I realize if I don't do that, like for Excel, for instance, if I don't learn how to do a certain feature or use pivot tables or whatever, I'm going to be slicing data and trying to do it all manually and doing all this stuff forever. So kind of, I'll put my head down and try to learn something like that. It's something I think I learned earlier on. That's helped me a lot in my career too. It's just like take the time, learn how to do it better, and then once then apply that. It saves you a lot of time in the long run. So that's kind of one of the things I've taken away out of a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
training and stuff I've
Yeah.
had. So yeah.
Where are the perennials?
Yeah, where are the perennials? What's a
They're
perennial?
over there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
All right. So then now you're doing corporate training. You're
Mhm.
learning along the way. You're continuing to get more account management.
Mhm.
We're still heading towards that direction. You're not even in the HVAC building
No,
automation industry yet.
not even
Yeah.
close yet.
You're still
No.
going.
Yeah, still going. So next stop, I ended up at a company that was like a .com advertising company, essentially, that was selling. It was a job board, and it was a job board for the hospitality industry. So I took a little bit of a sideways turn there, but it was a .com, super fun environment. So technical wise, it wasn't like the best use of my technology skills at that particular junction. I was only there for about a year and a half, but it was a fun job. It's
Mm.
probably the best job I've had as far as um, the coworkers and the atmosphere and the fun office and the open. This was like in, just after kind of the 2000, early 2000s still at this point. So it was a really fun time. But that, it was a bit of a distraction, I suppose, on the overall path. But I did learn quite a bit there as far as getting more into, like, I'd say corporate sales, because I had a book of business that was a little more corporate. So I was calling on, because I got promoted. I started out in what they called the property division, which I'd be calling individual properties like hotels, restaurants, promoted into a department where we were targeting larger hospitality organizations. So you'd be calling on like
Mm.
Morton Steakhouse corporate, or what have you, Bally's and different companies that have large portfolios of hotels, restaurants, and other things. And again, trying to negotiate packages with them to help them with their recruitment needs, their advertising needs, their staff retention, et cetera. So that kind of got me more into like, I would say, yeah, at this point, strategic sales, but more at least exposed to various different buying sort of like styles with different corporations and, the web of different approvers and technical buyers and things like that needed to be involved even in those kind of transactions. So that was kind of a step up continuously. I think, a little more complicated, more complex sales in that particular role. At that point, no
Yeah. Different
travel,
audiences too.
different audience, different market, had to learn different terminology, which, I think is another important thing. And throughout my career, I've switched to a number of different industries that, that one wasn't very complex to learn technology, wise. But when you start getting into my next three jobs actually, which I'll tell you about, three careers, I guess, those took a lot of learning technology wise. But
Mm.
yeah, so that's when it starts to get fun, I'd say, these next three. So we're kind of gonna eat up the whole hour talking about my career, but yeah. So from there, I ended up. Then I got a recruiter through a recruitment company or a recruiting agency. There was a company here locally in Vancouver that was looking for essentially an inside salesperson, to come in and do proposals and work on a number of aspects of it. But I really enjoyed the nature of the job because it was very technical. So it was in a signal processing industry. So this company
Mm.
manufactures very high-end signal processing computing systems. So what they do is they manufacture components. A lot of it's for the military industry. So signals intelligence, signals jamming, satellite communications processing. We did some work for semiconductor industry, wafer stepper position processing, but for the most part, it was communications. And so that position was very interesting, starting in inside sales and sort of supporting somebody who was in the field. There's an account executive that lived in California that I was essentially his inside sales rep. So he would go to a meeting, do all the handshakey and the in-person stuff, and then call me on the car on the way back and be like, hey, we need a proposal. We got to write this up for this time. We got to do this, and this. Here's what I want you to include. And slowly but surely, I started getting involved more in the kind of like, prospecting side of it, building the territory, et cetera. And eventually I had had a chance to take over the Asia Pacific sales role because somebody left and there was an opening there, and I took a shot and I went to my boss and I was like, yeah, I want this, I want to try this out. And they were like, okay, you can give that a shot. So that was my first sort of territory that I owned on my own in like a high tech company, and it was the start of
Wow.
my traveling career, I suppose, as far as being in business development and getting to travel and meet customers, and go to a lot of trade shows and that kind of thing. So that position was I was there
And
for
you're
7
going to
years.
Asia.
Yeah, Asia and Canada was my territory at that time, and then I eventually got promoted in that role and took over as director of sales for the whole company. So that was a 7-year journey at that company that started with inside sales and then moved me all the way up to director of sales.
Wow, and it seems like a very sort of, like you said, high-end niche
Mhm.
technology
Yeah.
solution. Probably you know who the customers are, you know the players, you know who you got to go
Right.
after. There's not so much a broad mass appeal
Hmm.
for what
Yep.
you're trying to sell. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference there, one of the things I did, in Asia, for instance, I opened up India for the company. So it was like we did very little business in India and some legacy products. And I started focusing there and built it to $1 million a year territory in, a year or so. So that was kind of one of the wins, I suppose, I'm proud of in that particular company. So,
Mm.
things like that. And it was working with the trade commissioners for Canada and the US and getting in and picking a new partner and interviewing partners and developing them and going over there and going to meetings with them and training them how to sell the thing and making sure that we're doing so that part of the job was quite enjoyable, kind of the greenfield starting from scratch, which is another theme I've had back at CopperTree here, where that was fully greenfield, new company. We'll
Mm.
get there. That's 2 more jobs. We're not quite there yet. But
Well, really quick, did you learn any of the language during that 7 years of
Uh,
the places that you were
a little
frequenting?
bit, like enough to, go to the bar and order a drink and have dinner with because, a lot of it was channel sales, which actually that's a good point too. So at that point, I started selling through channels because internationally, going to Korea, I did a lot of work in South Korea, I did a lot of work in China, I did a lot of work in other places. Going to these places and, as a non-language speaker is difficult. And then conducting
Right.
business there, of course. So part of that is we sold through channels. So that was my first big experience with building channels and selling through channel partners and resellers and value-added resellers and all the complexity that comes along with that, right? But no, I didn't like learn the language necessarily, but enough to, converse with my partners and, to have dinner and be friendly with them. And a couple of
Yep. Yeah.
those,
Order, order a
companies
beer
are
and ask where the restroom is.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get a
Okay.
cab
So
home.
7 years there.
Yeah, 7 years there. And because at that point, talk about niche markets. Now I'm in high tech defense, in military sort of industry, electronics, which, that's
Yeah.
niche, especially in a place like where I live in Vancouver. I mean, if you're in Huntington, Alabama, there's lots of defense and high tech, but when you're up here in Vancouver, Canada, it's a little bit different. So there's another company that actually ended up recruiting me through a recruiter as well. Um, and that they manufactured submarines and submarine technology. So that was quite another shift, right? So I went from having to learn, signal processing and fast Fourier transforms and a bunch of, you know, analog to digital
To
conversion
flag
theory
signals. Yeah.
to, yeah, well, not even flag signals, but like, how did what the requirements are for life support systems per person on a submersible vehicle with humans on it. So that was interesting as well. Then, that company was, I was hired as business development director. So, at that time, and then I took over marketing while I was there as well. So that was my
Mm.
first. I mean, I'd always been marketing adjacent in the previous companies because, of course, sales and marketing.
Right.
And in fact, I reported to the VP of marketing at the signal processing job. But this was the first opportunity I had to actually kind of enact and take over marketing at that company. And so that involved, website, fully rebranding, website redesign, a number of initiatives like that along the way. But that was a really fun job. I mean, I get to, go and, be on submarines, military submarines, and do a number of interesting things like, sea exercises. When you're dealing with the U.S. Navy, they don't buy things that are inexpensive, low quality, et cetera. So, I remember particularly one project that I shepherded through was literally to design and sell them some hoses. And the hoses were for air to connect to something. And they were like 7 figures, these hoses. I mean, it was just like a whole new world.
Yeah.
And that exposed me to a lot of interesting commercial, bonding requirements, export development. So we used to get, our receivables insured by the government, and we used to work with Export Development Canada and a number of other government agencies to help because of the industry we're in. So there was a lot of strategic stuff there that I learned that was quite valuable. And just being in that industry was cool. People used to ask me, "What do you do?" I sell submarines. It was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool topic. Um,
Yep.
yeah, so that was my next stop on the long journey. I was only there for about 3 years. It wasn't a very long tenure there. Um, and the reason I moved on was actually another opportunity came my way through. This time it was ESC Automation and Delta Controls, who I knew very well because locally here in Vancouver, actually one of my very good friends I went to high school with had been working there already at this point since he graduated from Polytechnic University. So he had been there as an engineer in the beginning and then in sales at ESC Automation. And I knew the company. In fact, I'd gone on their ski trip before. They used to have they might still have it, but an annual ski trip. And I used to be able to just bring friends. And so my friend was like, "Hey, we want to come on the ski trip." So I went a couple of years in a row and got to know a bunch of people. And then a few years later, several years later, this opportunity came along and this recruiter contacted me and said, "Hey, we have this position we're hiring for, and we're looking for somebody to come in and take over business development." And he's like, "Hear me out, hear me out. It's a startup company." And right away, I'm like, this is before, this 10 years ago. Startup companies, yeah, okay. Startups are kind of, I don't know if that was a super great career move at that time, So tell me more.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a brand new company. Okay, I don't know. It's in a new industry. He started explaining it to me, and then when he mentioned it's backed and it's a joint venture between Delta Controls and ESC Automation.
Hmm.
That I was thinking, okay, well, that's pretty good. It's an interesting company, and I know them, right? So maybe I'll give it a shot. I'll have a look at it. And so when I came in to interview with them, they were like, "Hey, here's what we're planning to do. We have this technology. It's brand new. It's IoT. It's sustainability. We're going to try to change the way the world, looks at how buildings are controlled. But we can't do it from a single brand. We can't do it from, this is kind of an industry-wide type approach. So the goal for this technology is to eventually to grow in it, and it's going to be its own thing, right? This isn't a controls company doing this. At the end of the day, this is going to be, sort of a brand new category of companies out there. And there's a couple people doing it now, but it's a very new industry. So
Yep.
that part of it really appealed to me, and the fact that it was, already at that point 10 years ago, trending towards sustainability and environmental change and other things that were coming down. So I talked to them more, and then I talked to them some more, and then I eventually took the job. And I came in, and I was the first business side person, let's say, at CopperTree. There was some development already underway. The tool was in a very early stage, but there were essentially no paying customers at that point. And I really liked that aspect of it too, is building something, building it from scratch. And now 10 years later, I can't believe it's been that long, but having a chance to look back and say, wow, look at where we were, look where we are. I mean, it's just such a change in everything, in the industry and in our company and everything. I mean, everything that's been happening. So that's been a really, really positive.
Yeah. Huge sense of accomplishment, and and they've done exactly what they told you they were going to do, right? You had a startup, joint venture, and now you guys are kind of off on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And fully, yeah, everything else has changed as far as corporate structure and, ownership and, a number of other things have shifted around. But yeah, the mission has been consistent, and I remember, you might remember this too in the early days of your career. It's like showing up to meetings, and I've used this term before, but it's like showing people fire for the first time. You'd sit down in a meeting and they'd go, "What are we here to talk about?" And you'd say, "Well, hear me out. Okay, we're sticking this little box you're building, and we're gonna pull data out of it, and we're gonna send it to the cloud." And this time it wasn't like everyone was working every day on, Microsoft Office 365 and storing everything on OneDrive and Google Drive and whatever. This is 10 years ago. People were going, "You can't connect to my building and push my data, my HVAC data to the cloud. Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
It was just a very interesting time. So at that time, were we a little early? Maybe, right? But am I glad we did it then? Yes, because it gave us a lot of extra sort of reps. We put a lot of reps in before the industry was ready, and I think you guys are the same. at KMC.
Yeah.
It's like put a lot of reps in before the industry's now coming around and saying, hey, I need this thing. Oh, you've been doing this for 10, 12 years, whatever. Oh, that's great. Tell me more about that, right? I think
Yeah. I mean, which kind of partner do you want? Exactly.
exactly. So that
Yeah.
part, that very positive experience throughout this time, and being part of building something from essentially the ground up is really exciting. Has its challenges, as you know. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
days are difficult, other days, you got big wins, and but overall, that's kind of my journey from, sort of after high school. And along the way, I skipped some education. I did along the way. I got a business diploma from Simon Fraser University, management and advanced technology. I've been doing some other education on some professional certificates, things like that, along the way. So furthering myself a
Yeah.
little bit with these new MOOC. I don't know if you're using those at all, Tim, but these EDX and Coursera and whatever. I mean, it's just what an amazing opportunity to upskill yourself, right? So I always make a goal to try to be doing one course all the time, at least one. And I've taken
Oh, wow.
classes. Yeah, I've done a lot of them, from Wharton and from Queen's University and Harvard. Like, I mean, you can get on there literally and have access to the best education in the world, if you want, free of charge. I mean, I always typically upgrade and get the certificates, but that's
Yep.
been a big keystone for me in the last several years. It's just been trying to keep myself relevant with those types of initiatives along the way. Right.
Yeah. Being intentional to learn on an
Mhm.
ongoing basis
Yeah.
in one way or another. The
Yeah.
I have never done a certified. Is it a MOOC? MOO
Yeah. It's like massive open online course. I think
course.
that's what it's, or yeah. Anyhow, it's called a MOOC. I'm not exactly sure, but the first one I'd
Yeah.
experienced was the edx.org. I'll give them a little plug because I've quite
Yep.
enjoyed their platform. And yeah, you go on there, I want to learn artificial intelligence stuff or whatever. You go on there, there's 50 courses you can take. Some of them are, I mean, you can do an MBA on there if you want, a full MBA, it costs
Yeah.
money, and there you go. I mean, it's really amazing. So,
Well, and that's one of the things too. If you go online, you could find a course or a degree syllabus. These are all the classes you need to take
Mhm.
to get whatever degree you want. Break those out into individual classes that you take online, and now, for all intents and purposes, you have the education.
yeah,
Because so much of what you learn is on the job training. You're taking the theoretical and now applying it, and that takes considerable more time and
Mhm.
years to do it. But the more you're learning and the more you're applying, that's where the real changes in the development takes place. So
Exactly.
I've never done a certified MOOC. I've
Mhm.
done a couple of shorter, like 3 to 5 hour
Yep.
courses on things.
Mhm.
I don't have a huge amount of experience around finance, for instance.
That's
I've
it.
never had a financial job. I've never been, responsible for an income statement, right? And so, what are some ways that I could sharpen that? These sorts of tools are great for that. And
Absolutely.
then, how can we become, students of our craft? Well, let's learn about AI. Let's
Mhm.
learn about Web 2.0 or 5.0 or whichever point oh we're on. How do all these things work? But then what you also learn, and I always try to learn with this mindset, is how I could then go and teach that to other people.
Mhm.
Because if I'm ingesting information, whether I'm reading a book, listening to an audiobook or a podcast, with the sense of, okay, I want to go and share this with, my coworkers or my partners, or I want to apply it to a business strategy that I'm trying to put in place, you listen differently,
That's it.
right? Um, One of the nice things about doing, then tying back to what you're doing, about instead of doing the free version, doing that certificate, is it's that skin in the game of, I'm going to teach it to other people, but also, like, I'm paying money for this,
Yep.
and that is, I want to do right by that and be responsible towards how I'm stewarding that,
Yep.
while also then learning and bettering myself. How long, roughly, have you been trying to stay up to date with these new ways of education?
I think my first MOOC, and a colleague of mine introduced me to them. He said, "Hey, check this out. This is really neat." I think the first one I did was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a while. I've been doing
Hmm.
it for a bit. And then yeah, I kind of got hooked on them, to be honest, because you can go at the first one of the first ones I did was contract negotiations and contract law, and that was through Harvard
Yeah.
X. And that course really was, because it was very pertinent, because I find myself, even though I'm not a lawyer, I play one on TV sometimes, I feel, right? And so do you, I'm sure. It's just like, here's a
Yeah.
contract to review. And in a smaller company like us, we don't send everything to counsel. I mean, that would be crazy. It's just, so you
Yep.
have to know enough, just like you're saying about finance. You want to be able to go into a boardroom meeting and talk through finance with, with the controller or whoever, and, reasonably know what you're talking about, and not have to,
Mhm.
so it was like that with law for me. And so, I had done quite a bit of sort of contract review and, sort of back channel contract review, but I didn't have any sort of formal education in that. So that course, that first one I took, was really, it talked about, contract law. I think the name of it's contract law, trust, from trust to promise or something, basically the evolution of contracts. What forms a contract? Why do we need one? What are the key aspects of a contract? All those kind of things that,
Mhm.
you take for granted when you're reading through. Whereas, and there's all these, these indemnity clauses, and these, these limitations of liability, and these, all the other clauses that are always in contracts, just explaining what the background for those were, why they're necessary, what if we didn't have them, how to formulate one, right? So that really got me hooked on kind of all these different courses. And since then, I've, like you
Mhm.
said, I've been picking parts of my craft, so to speak, that I feel, hey, I need a bit of a wake up on this one, or things seem to be passing me by. Because what I'm seeing is folks are coming out of schools with, of course, they're taking a business degree now, or economics or whatever, and their curriculum is quite different than anything that I've learned in my past education. So I've got that on the job
Right.
experience stuff, but marrying that in with the latest and greatest that they're teaching in the schools today is really important, I think, because I was having a debate with somebody the other day about AI, and I'm thinking, I've been using, AI now, Chat GPT and stuff, and playing with that quite a bit. I don't know if you have, but wow,
Mhm.
what an interesting,
Yeah.
hey, write me a blog post. Yeah, make it a little bit better, make it a little bit more detailed. Don't talk about this, talk about it. So prompting AI, like, that's the kind of thing I think is the types of things in our industry we need to stay on top of, because the kids coming out of school
Yeah.
are all over that, right? So
I wrote a 47-page book in 2 hours using
wow.
ChatGPT,
Yep.
and I wrote the introduction myself that essentially said, "This is a scary tool because of what I was able to just do,
Yeah.
and here are things that I immediately found that was amazing, and like not so amazing."
Yep. Yeah.
Quoting people that didn't actually say those things, that
Yep.
kind of. Uh,
Yeah.
but just while at the same time being wowed by where technology is and where it's going to be 5 years from now,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's the idea of taking stock in what we have now, being mesmerized by the
Yeah.
mesmerizable,
Yeah.
while also having kind of that level set of
Yeah.
what's right. But going back to the contracts, I have several books from school, like 4 or 5 that I've kept from when I was in college, and one of them is The Legal Environment of
Uh,
Business,
that's a
and contracts, and like you said, I play one on TV sometimes. I don't know, how many I signed last year. I don't know how many I'm going to sign this coming year. But even things like, there are clauses, you mentioned indemnity, that may only be somewhat enforceable outside of what they're of what they state, and so even then it's like those clauses aren't always hard and fast,
yeah.
and it's interesting, and but how do you know those things unless you really take the time,
Yeah.
invest the effort to learn, to read about it, which then ultimately protects you, protects your business, and helps you help other people.
Yeah.
When you went to work for CopperTree First and Delta, were you able to work with some of those friends that you had there?
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah. I still do to this
Yeah.
day. I mean, they're, ESC anyhow, or Ainsworth is, still a reseller partner of ours, and they still work there. I mean, one of the things about, I was lucky in that regard, is that a lot of those folks, it's a long-term place to work, and so is CopperTree. And so, you build, and even amongst the industry, forget about just within those companies. I mean, when people in the industry, because it is so small, I'm sure you see this too. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a small
Yeah.
industry. So when you leave a certain company, in a controls world or the analytics world, you probably are going somewhere else that you're going to bump into them at the ASHRAE conference or see them over here. And likely you're going to work with them again. So that part of the industry, I think, is really positive, is that brain power for the most part. Once in a while, you probably see this too. Once in a while, you see somebody and they leave their role at, XYZ controls company or contractor or whatever. And all of a sudden I decided to go be a realtor, right? You're like, what? We lost one, like he's out of the industry, like for real. So, that happens too. But for the most part, you're like, where's, you see that little announcement on LinkedIn. You're like, where are they going? Right? You click expand. Oh, You're going there. Oh yeah. Cool. So that part's interesting to see kind of where people evolve and, you try to build up folks. You're talking about kind of your own team, like what it's really rewarding. Well, it's not great to have somebody leave the company, let's say, but to see somebody that you've fostered and helped grow and mentored, let's say, and see them leave the company and go on to maybe something that we couldn't offer them. They wanted something slightly different. They want to work for a bigger company. That's cool. To me, it's part of, I did that. I just listed off my entire career. I mean, I bounced around. I wouldn't say tons. I mean, I know a lot of people that had a new job every year, which, but for me, seeing somebody kind of succeed and go out and do something, you never know. They might come back. You might work with them again 3 companies from now and in 10 years, right?
Yep.
So making sure you keep those relationships strong and you're not, you don't burn bridges on the way out and stuff like that. I think that's really important. Another lesson I definitely recommend, I could probably go back to any company I worked for and work for them again if I needed to, or I wanted to. So that's important. And to me, that speaks to character and not burning bridges as you leave somewhere. Because I've seen that happen. We've had some bridges burned, or people leave in a way that you're like, wow, that's interesting.
Like, really?
It's a really interesting way of doing it. Good luck with that in the future.
I started at KMC in 2016, and I left for the year of 2019 because a new opportunity came. But when I left KMC, it was pretty bittersweet. I mean, I so enjoyed everyone here. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the product, the company. It was just one of those things where I met these people, the opportunity came up, and I couldn't pass it up. And I was very clear about that. Kept in touch throughout that year. And then when the time came that I realized, you know what, this isn't working out, they were the first people I reached out to, and they were like, yes, like we'd like you to come back.
Yeah, there you go.
And now I've been back to KMC longer than I was there in my first stint, or here in my first stint. And like just the way time works is interesting. The significance of the passage of time. But it happens so quickly. But it's not burning those bridges, and it's keeping those relationships. And I don't know how many times we had someone on the podcast last season. I talked about the industry being like very short. You have tall industries, lots of different levels and tiers, but it's very short and it's very wide.
It's wide. Yep.
And so, to get from, being a, let's say, entry-level technician to CEO of something else, like, you don't have that many jumps to make if you make the right moves and network and that sort of thing. Whereas other industries, very wide and very tall, I think like the tech industry, for instance, major consumer products, that's a difficult world to really kind of get up to that top spot. There's only so many of those spots. But, just the way people jump and, you hear.
Yep.
It's like everyone's worked at Johnson, or everyone's worked at Siemens, or everyone's worked at Trane. It's like they've kind of put their time in at all these different places. But then that all together really makes our industry, I think, stronger, because we see the good that some of those companies have, and we see like the bad and the ugly.
Yep.
And then we can take that and move it other places and just kind of raise the industry all up together. You mentioned mentoring. Have you ever been in a formal mentorship through any of these jobs?
I have been on the receiving end, so I've been a mentee, I suppose, in a more formal way. We're a little bit more of a smaller organization, and I know a lot of times you mentor a mentee outside of your own organization, which is something that I'd be interested in the future. I think that's something I would look to as I continue to progress in my career and whatever. Look to maybe become a mentor and look to other mentees, look for a new mentor and to become a mentor as well. Or probably external to the company. I think that would be a useful practice, but just to freshen things up, because again, like you said, it is a small industry. And I think we end up in a little bit of groupthink sometimes, right? We have a way
Yeah.
that things are done, and we spun out of a controls company, and so did and KMC is one, and KMC Commander is sort of one. I mean, we're a different part of that sort of small industry, right? And so I think maybe
Yeah.
there'd be a lot of value in me. That's maybe one of the goals I should set for myself for the coming years here, is to find an external source as a mentor to help with some of that, to get out of the groupthink, because I do think we get into that a bunch. And like you said, well, I was at Siemens and Honeywell and Johnson, and I was all these places. Well, similarly, they all have, they're different, but they're all kind of similar in a way too. So I think that'd be a good strategy, and that I should pursue personally. And as far as mentoring, I mean, I try people that are on my team, of course. I try to foster, training and development, and try to get people to, come to me with, with challenges, and try to help them work through it. But I could probably do a bit of work more on the formality of that, and kind of work through. That's something I'll make as a resolution for myself in the next little while. How about yourself? Has that been something you've done formally before?
So not inside the workplace. I've had a mentor outside. It was connected to my church in a ways, and then also there was he was the father of one of my best friends. He's stepped in many times, and he's used to be a sales guy, and then now he's a corporate coach. And he's trying to invest his talents and giftings into other people, and he's done that with me quite a bit as well. And then what I've been trying to do in the last year or so is really find ways that I can invest in other people around me, like here at KMC, or even in in our partnerships or our customers, and try to take our conversations from kind of the day-to-day level to the more like, here's what we're trying to do, here's our vision, here's our goals, here's what leadership could look like in that. And in a way, the podcast is an outlet of that effort to kind of take these conversations to the higher level, reach across the competitive aisle, reach out to partners, go up and down the height of our industry, because these people, again, at the top of the industry are very accessible. You could call almost any of them up and be only one or two people away from them. But it's just try to encourage high quality conversation about how we can be better as individuals and help each other out. And I think a lot of times people don't always sit back and think about how they got where they are. They may do some short-term planning about where they're going to go, but it's so easy, right, for 10 years to go by like that without the proper reflection. But as soon as you reflect on it, you're like, hey, I can do better to mentor other people. I can do better to bring others, because every interaction that I have is the beginning potential of the next 10 years for them. And I want them to be able to look back and say, hey, Keith really helped me, or Tim really helped me. And likewise, that's mutual encouragement that takes place, right? It's never one-sided. It always goes both ways when you're in those mentoring or having those kinds of conversations. So, Keith, obviously we never really know where our careers are going to take us. You very well could be at CopperTree for the next 20 years. I could be at KMC for the next 20 years, or not. Tides turn, things change. But what do you see in terms of what you want to focus? I'm thinking more like topic or industry trends. So where do you sit now? Where do you see the industry going, and that you're trying to point your feet in that direction?
Wow. It's a big question. I think for us, for me anyhow, I think the industry, we talked about AI a minute ago. So, I mean, I think there's going to be more of that coming into a lot of industries, right? I think we need to make our technologies more accessible, easier to deploy, more ubiquitous, I suppose, more interactive, more integrated with other things. So I think there's going to be, and one of the courses I'm taking right now is about connected strategy and how to automate fulfillment, automate needs analysis, sort of like be there before the customer and know what they need, I think that's going to be a key theme here, because the model we're in right now is a little clunky. It's heavy lift on the sales side of things, or on the engagement with customers. If we can get it to a point where a lot of it is automated, a lot of it is preemptive, needs based. Like one example that in this course I'm taking is, some of these printer manufacturers now, they have connected printers that know when you need ink, and the ink shows up at your house. How convenient is that, right? Now, they charge a little bit more, and so they're making extra out of it. They're getting more brand loyalty, and but the customer experience is connected. They know what you need. They know you need black and not color. It shows up 3 days before your ink runs out based on your average printing habits. Maybe paper arrives in the same way. I mean, that kind of experience, if you could take that into our industry where, you know, we can make that seamless for the customers. They don't have to think about it, and things get done for them. That's really what people are looking for, right? They're looking for not another tool that they have to go and use and learn how to use and dedicate time to and all this stuff. Yeah. So when I think about kind of where things could go, that's one of the place my mind goes. But how do we get there? That's a whole nother discussion. But I think just understanding that the world is moving in that direction in a lot of areas. And so I think we need to sit down as an industry and think about how we can smoothen out and facilitate the deployment and the adoption of IoT technology and tools that are going to help us.
Yeah. Keith, I'm right there with you. So I'm committed for this podcast to not be salesy, but I'll use our products as an example of where I see the industry going. KMC Commander connects to a building, brings the data to the cloud for visibility and control. Now all that data is there, and we could either bring data in or push data out. How great would it be if with a couple clicks of a button, no sales conversation, all I need to do is put in a credit card. I click a button, data starts flowing to CopperTree. CopperTree recognizes the building and the data, can say, hey, I estimate I could save you X amount. Here's what it would cost. Do you want to continue? Yes, continue. Boom, It's sold. And now from, at 12:30 I was interested, and at 1 o'clock I have analytics and fault detection running on my building.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get to that? Right? Because like you said, right now it is so... It is so the sales cycle is longer than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And you're looking at things like, budget constraints, and then you have to go talk to the right people, and then the right people that want it aren't the right people that buy it. How do we just smooth that out and automate it as much as possible?
Yeah.
I think, like you said, there's a conversation to get to that. And it's not just our products, it's every smart building product that's out there.
Yeah, exactly. And 6-month sales cycle, and this or that. I mean, take that a step further, Jim, and what if it fixes issues for you? Like, hey, by the way, here's your analytics, and then in the first month you get a number of options. You can click a button to say enable that. Optimize my hot water reset based on outdoor air temp and occupancy and demand from the air handling unit, the valves. I mean, and you do all that automatically, and that savings gets achieved. Or another step further, it's kind of like an Angie's List for, hey, well, we have a contractor locally who can come in and change out that leaky valve for you. Would you like them to come have a look? Like, I have a Nest thermostat, and I don't know if you have a Nest thermostat, but my Nest thermostat the other day told me that my furnace is short cycling, and it did it on an app in my phone, and it said, would you like to have somebody come have a look at that? We have a number of Nest pros around the area that can come have a look for you. Would you like that? And I ignored it, and then it happened again, and it said, hey, your furnace is cycling. And so now I'm like, all right. So I had someone come look. I mean, that kind of model, picture that, right? Take it right out of the hands of, hey, there's a guy showing up or person showing up to come fix your boiler for you because we noticed it's short cycling and, this and that. So that could be an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And apply that to every aspect of every building, and how useful time savings, increases efficiency, decreases consumption, all these goals that we talk about as an industry all the time. Yeah. And then, just being willing to work together as individual solution providers and vendors to make it happen.
Yep. Yeah, that's a key part.
Wow. No, Keith, thank you so much again. Amazing conversation, like I knew it would be. I love hearing this background and how diverse it is, but how you really seem to have a clear understanding of how each job has prepared you for the next one and what you've learned from it, and how then you continue to learn. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I have, and I think our people listening, could have is just continue learning, don't stop, continue applying what you're learning, and kind of always be willing to take that next step to increase influence and make changes for yes, the product, but also the industry as well.
Right on, Tim. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on, and really cool to be part of it. Look forward to listening to this episode and the other ones that follow. And thanks a lot again.
Okay. Well, this wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KNC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share. And if there's anyone that you'd like to see on our podcast, tag them in the comments or reach out to us. We'll tag them in the comments. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.